All righty, well, we're off and running. Well, thank you all for being here today for our second session of the Virtual Entrepreneurship Toolkit series. We're really excited to have you join us. My name's Cameron Law, and I'm the Executive Director of the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I'm joined by one of our entrepreneurs in residence, Dr. Brian Gladden. If you're not familiar with the Carlson Center, we serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to discover, build, and launch their businesses. And we are really on this mission to make innovation and entrepreneurship pervasive throughout the greater Sacramento region and working towards realizing this vision of having the Sacramento region be a premier hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. And how we've gone about operationalizing that is really working with you along the entrepreneurial journey and that continuum of support. And so we have built programs at 3 distinct phases. We call it our Discover, Build, and Launch programs. And tonight's program, the Toolkit series, is part of our Build programs, where we really give you the tools, mindsets, and frameworks to go about turning your idea into a business model and really finding out a business model that's desirable, feasible, and viable as you go forward. Tonight's session is our second of 5. We're really excited to jump into the elements of the unique value proposition, solution, existing alternatives, early adopters, and jobs to be done. And to help us with some of these concepts, we have a guest speaker, which we're really excited. Craig Elias, who's an entrepreneur in residence at Bow College in Alberta, Canada. So we're excited to have an international speaker here, and he's a colleague of Brian on some other work that they do with LeanStack, and he'll be more formally introduced later by Brian. But before we get started and before I pass it over to Brian, just a little bit of housekeeping. We'd love for you to have your video on if possible. Always great for user engagement, but we also would ask that you stay muted during the presentation portion. Just makes for a better experience as you might go through the recording later. But if you do have questions at any pause in our presentation, feel free to raise those Zoom hands or throw it into the chat. We're happy to bring your question in and ask you to unmute at that time. We'll also be using the breakout features to do our hands-on exercise with some of these tools. So just giving you some preparation that we will be breaking out into various groups. And would love for you all to introduce yourselves and get familiar with that chat feature. Maybe share a little bit about what you're working on, what brought you here today. And then if you want to share your LinkedIn to connect with one another, that's always a great thing to do. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Brian, and really excited to have you all here in this space. So take it away, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you, Cameron, and welcome back, everybody. It looks like most of you joined us last week, so we are happy you are back with us. And some of you are repeat offenders, so good to see you all again. Let me bring up just some introductory slides, and then we'll get going. All right. So if you remember from last week, there were several topics we talked about to kick off week 1, the important things, which was around the customer and their problem, and you, the founding team, and the culture and leadership that you provide. Just a recap of last week. What are the things that we covered? You know, we talked about changing your mindsets to love the problem, not the solution. And we're going to get even deeper into that today. Don't build the solution first, right? Gather insights. Use the lean canvas to document your business model. We're going to continue to work through all 5 weeks, the lean canvas as the foundation. And then we have this concept with the leaner canvas, and Craig's even going to talk further about that this week, because this is really important, problems that your customers have. And then we got more into leadership and the entrepreneur and the founder, and then the culture starting with you and your why. Why are you doing this? What's your passion? And Hernani Alves talked about balanced accountability and really winning hearts by showing love. So if you have any questions from last week, throw those in the chat. We can quickly answer those before we move into this week. Next week, just so you know what's coming up, we're going to talk about go-to-market strategies, some of the other elements of the lean canvas, and those will be your channels, your relationships, partners, things like that, as well as ideation. Hopefully after today, you'll have a little bit better understanding of your customer's problems. So then how do we ideate to create that solution around it and create traction test our assumptions by running lean experiments. So I'm hoping you're with us again next week. As Cameron said, this week we're going to really look at the unique value prop and solution, but more importantly, what are the problems you're trying to solve, and get deeper into that with a concept called jobs to be done, looking at existing alternatives, which is your competition, but at a broader scope, and early adopters. And Craig, as guest speaker, will introduce him in a second. It's going to help us with this area. So if you remember, we start each week with the lean canvas. And so last week we touched on problem and customer. We're going to get deeper into that. And also the early adopters and existing alternatives, which you remember part of that leaner canvas. And then touch on here the UVP and solution. And hopefully, if you remember, we don't want to start building things first, right? So we want to get to problem, solution, fit before we start building stuff. So what is this unique value prop? Many of you have probably tried to already create it before you started actually validating what the problems and what insights you can gather from your prospects and customer segments. And really that solution that you're creating, what do we want to do? Well, we want to list the top 3 features of that unique value prop, UVP, that solves the problem and need. So the end state, if we look at our lean canvas, our goal is to write down our solution once we understand what that needs to be. And the goal here, where it says, list your 3 top features of your solution, would be to map that feature to one of these problems. Our goal is, how does our solution, our UVP, solve the customer's problems that we come to realize? And we don't want to build this thing first. We want to go discover problems, jobs to be done, and gather insights before we start building something. So again, we want to reiterate, don't start building your minimum viable product. We need to validate that your idea of a solution has value before you start building this, to waste time, and we don't want to waste time and money. To help us dig deeper into gathering these insights before you start building this UVP and solution, I want to introduce you to Craig, a colleague of mine. Craig is from Bow Valley College up in Alberta, Canada. He is an entrepreneur in residence, as Cameron mentioned, and also a fellow Lean Stack coach. And if you remember, Lean Stack is the company who created Lean Canvas, Ash Moria, as well as many other concepts and tools. Craig is also very versed in many of the other innovation and strategy frameworks that you have heard me talk about. Tonight, I'm going to have Craig go through some of the things that some of you have heard me talk about before, but to me, it's always good to have a fresh take, a little bit different perspective, maybe on the same sort of content, but look at it from a different perspective, maybe different terms, different use cases. So hopefully some different light bulbs go on for you, or it just reiterates that foundation of the mindset and tools that I've been telling you about. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Craig share his screen now. And I want you guys to please welcome with me Craig Elias, a colleague, and we will do some exercises together, and I will jump in at certain points. And at the end, we will gather all your questions and do some follow-up. Craig is going to take a slight break at the end and come back with us, and then we'll recap and do some Q&A at the very end as well. So Craig, take it away. I know you have a deeper introduction of yourself as well, so I'm going to leave that to you.
Yeah, so I have good news. So the good news is I've been left alone in the building, which means I don't actually have to leave until 9:30. I have texted my son. My son and I are 2/3 of the way back from our summer vacation at the cottage that we have a couple hours north of Toronto. My wife flies home on Thursday afternoon. My son turned 16 earlier this year, and where I live in Alberta, kids can actually get a learner's permit at the age of 14. So at the age of 15, he went away and got a learner's permit. Now he's trying to find a way to get as much mileage in as possible. And it is 36 hours of driving from the cottage to the house. So he's right now at the hotel looking after the dogs, and he's grateful he gets another 30 minutes to watch TV without his dad being around. So hi, everybody. My name is Craig Elias, and I'm sure last week, let me make sure I have the right thing up. Hold on. There we go. So Brian, can everybody see my slides? Can you see the number one reason? So last week you learned sort of what are the reasons that startups actually fail. But I want to start this week with something totally different. I'm curious what people think is, I'm curious what people think is the biggest single predictor of success. What is it that successful entrepreneurs have that makes them much more likely to be successful as an entrepreneur? So what I want everybody to do just for a second is I want you to put in the chat, what do you think is the biggest single predictor of success for entrepreneurs? Anybody willing to guess what's the biggest single predictor of success? Anybody? Don't be shy. What do you think it is? Dedication, persistence. They wrote their idea down. They have a plan. Let's see if we can get one more. Endurance. Endurance is important, but it turns out that it's actually none of these. It turns out the biggest single predictor of success as an entrepreneur is how big is your network. So I'm a huge believer that if you want to be successful, you need to have a very successful network. So I'm lucky enough that Ash is one of those people in my network, as is a really cool guy who I describe as the crazy hair on fire version of me. His name is Adam Burke. Brian's part of the team. Heidi Neck, one of my favorite professors at Babson College. Ravi Bolani, who runs the Alchemist Accelerator down in Silicon Valley. Ravi actually was an analyst at Draper Fisher Jurvetson when I got my first money from a venture capitalist. So for me, the first thing I want to make sure everybody does, and I've only seen a handful of you do this so far, is I want you to go to LinkedIn. I want you to take your entire link, including the HTTPS. Take the entire link, just put it in the chat. If you're comfortable, it's amazing how many people, when they start a venture, who's the first person they put on their team? Somebody they were in class with. So take even just the LinkedIn link, the whole thing, including the HTTPS, put it in the chat. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to pick on Vanessa for a second, Vanessa. What I'm going to ask you to do is don't be one of those lazy networkers and just put your link in the chat. Go find 2 people you're not connected with yet. Go send them LinkedIn connection requests. When you do that, it gives you a chance to actually send a message. Just put a couple of words in there, right? Just put in the names of the people, like put in, Craig and whatever, or put in something so we're gonna know where that came from. So if they don't get to it for a few weeks later, they know where that connection came from. So let's try and find a way to get as many people as possible. Okay.
Just open tabs. That's
Sorry, go ahead, Vanessa. What was the question?
I literally just opened your tabs.
Okay.
Like 2 of them, and I'm gonna write a message.
There we go. So this, like, don't get me wrong. There's lots of content and value in what you're going to learn today, but I'm going to argue some of the hidden value is going to be the people you meet at these events, okay? And going through this
I
program.
believe that, yeah.
Let me just go like this. Perfect. So what's inside the presentation? We will spend some time on value proposition. I come at this with a very specific purpose. My argument to you is that when you lead with your value proposition, it causes people to ask a question. And the most important question you want them to ask is, how do you do that? We'll spend some time on the difference between competition and competitors, which touches on the jobs to be done. We want to make sure we spend time on early adopters. It's amazing how hard it is to get people to become customers. If you're focused on people that are too far down the technology adoption curve, then it's going to be really hard to get to them. And then we'll spend a little time on the what's next. Now you've done this, what comes after this? I'm just going to go back to this again, some reason. There we go. So this is my story. My story is at the age of 40, I came up with an idea for a business, and I got involved in a pitch competition held by a very famous venture capitalist named Tim Draper. And it was open to anybody on the planet. To get into the competition, you had to submit 1,500 characters, not words, 1,500 characters about your idea. So I submitted my 1,500 characters, and I went around Calgary where I live and told all these successful entrepreneurs that I was going to be one of the top 10 in the planet or on the planet because they get 5 minutes with this very famous venture capitalist. And of course, every person I talked to said, Yeah, right. You're a snotty-nosed, first-time entrepreneur who's 40 years old. You have no idea what you're doing. Turns out they were wrong. Turns out I got totally lucky and that my pitch resonated with Tim Draper. In the end, I won the entire competition, got $1 million US prize, moved to California, lived on an island halfway between San Francisco and Oakland. So it's not on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge like someone's got on their background. It's actually the other bridge. It's halfway across. It's Yerba Buena was the island that I lived in. And when I moved to California, I went to Tim Draper and I said, what did you see in my 5 minutes to say you're going to give me $1 million? He told me two things. The first thing he said to me was, it didn't take me 5 minutes to decide I was going to give you $1 million. It took me 30 seconds. And then he told me something even more amazing. He said, it actually wasn't that I was going to give you $1 million in the first 30 seconds, but in the first 30 seconds, I decided I was going to give you 5 if you needed it. So here's my first question for everybody here. What did Tim see in the first 5 minutes or in the first 30 seconds? What do investors really look for? What are the 3 things they care about the most? Who wants to put something in the chat? What do you think are the 3 things they care about the most before they give you money? And I'll take Cameron and Brian's answers too. Let's see. So what do you think it is? Trust, self-conviction, no. Risk, no. Not even in the top 10. What are the 3 things they care about the most? Passion. The problem, market size. Brian is right. The first thing they care about is how big is the market. There's a really interesting book about getting investors, and the first thing they care about is the wave. How big is the market? Maybe you want to guess what the second thing is. So how big is the market? Got suggestions? It's not a problem or a team. Anybody else? What's the second thing? First one is market size. It's 2 words. Second word is model. What's the first word? The business model, right? Then that's the second thing they care about. What do you think is the third thing they care about? What's the next big thing? Somebody else other than Vanessa. If you want to guess, we'll play some Jeopardy. Scalability, no. It isn't the last word is ability at the end. Think about if you owned a castle in England, what would you build around the outside of a castle? You build a moat. So the third thing investors care about is how defensible is your business. Defensibility. Turns out I was just flat out lucky and talked about that stuff in the first 30 seconds. So I ended up down in Silicon Valley. I spent some time while I was down there. I jumped on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn earlier than almost anybody else on the planet. But I'm not just bragging. I got on day 8. There's 750 million people on LinkedIn. I measured 3,956 out of those 750 million people. If you send me a LinkedIn connection request, don't feel bad if I don't accept it right away, because I'm at the maximum, 30,000 people. I actually have to go kick somebody out of my network just so I can let you in. My company was picked as one of the 50 most promising companies in all of North America twice, got on to NBC News, and then something happened. I became a dad, and my wife was living in Calgary. So I gave it all up, came back home, put in place a CEO to spend some time with my son. Now, my son is in this picture. My son's a bit of an overachiever. He's a little like his dad. Does anybody want to guess which one of these might be my son? Put it in the chat. Which one do you think might be? Who's the overachiever in that crowd? Anybody? Anybody want to guess where the overachiever is? The one of the most right? No. Anybody notice some kid actually happens to have 2 guns? That would be my son. When we have water pistol fights, he has like a slew of water pistols. He's got one down his back, one down his shorts, the biggest one you can possibly find. When we do Nerf gun fights, same thing. He's got tons of them. I always try to find a way to give my son interesting experiences. So last year, before COVID came along, we actually got involved in a hackathon. I wanted my son to experience what that's like, to come up with an idea over a weekend, validate an idea, work on it, go through this whole process. My plan was to come second in the contest, because if I came second, or we came second, we all got $5,000 to split. He would get some money to put towards a sailing trip. There was only one flaw to my theory. We actually came first and got a $10,000 check, and he got to put his money towards a sailing trip. I get to do some really cool stuff with Babson College and Goldman Sachs. I'm on an advisory team for South by Southwest. I'm a growth mentor for the Alchemist Accelerator, but I hang out at Bow Valley College as the entrepreneur residence. And I have visited and spoken at all kinds of incubators and accelerators across North America, Europe, and Australia. And what I've learned is the power of a network. I put together a 5-day innovation event just a few weeks ago. Cameron and Brian might recognize the guy on the very far left, Bob Mwesta. We ended up having 3 awesome speakers, 3 moderators. These were all successful entrepreneurs that told their story. These were all the judges, students, and all of this came from my network. In fact, when I came up with this crazy idea, I went to see somebody to ask for advice. And it turns out I didn't end up getting advice. I ended up getting money. And I have 2 groups now that have given me almost $1 million to do the things that I do. And I didn't ask for money. I went to my network and asked for help. I, like Brian and Cameron, tend to focus on the very early part of this process, because I'm a big believer by doing things inside post-secondary schools, we can create role models. And even just one role model in one institution can make an amazing difference. What we do with the top 3 from our pitch competition, we send them down to Silicon Valley. We send them down to, and I'm just going to do this again. We send them down to a 5-week boot camp put on by Tim Draper. We just had 3 students go down there. And it's amazing what happens when you take somebody and put them in a 5-week boot camp with 80 people from 23 countries all over the world. You're very familiar with the Lean Canvas. Brian's helped you understand and Cameron's helped you understand. You don't want to fall in love with the solution. You need to fall in love with the problem, or you need to fall in love with the customer. And depending upon the kind of business that you're building, you might fall in love with them first instead of the other. If it's a for-profit business, I'm a big fan of focusing on the problem first and then go looking at the customers. If you're doing this from a nonprofit perspective, how do you find the people you want to help first and then figure out what problems you can help them with? The challenge, and Ash has figured this out, is that when you give people a Lean Canvas, they do all this work on a Lean Canvas. They go and they see an advisor, a mentor, or a coach, and they're so invested in their idea that they don't take the feedback that they're given because they don't want to go backwards. They figure, I've already done this work, I just want to go forwards, which is one of the reasons why Ash created something called a leaner canvas. Just figure out the problem, the competition, the customer, and who's going to become your customer first. So I want to spend time on these 4 areas. If you have questions along the way, you can raise your hand. For those of you who don't know how to raise your hand, inside the Zoom piece down the very bottom right-hand corner, there should be something called reactions. I can't see it myself, but if you click on it, there's a bunch of emojis, and then right at the very bottom, there's one that says raise your hand. So we've got lots of things to talk about. And for me today, it's not about getting all this content out, but it's having you take something away and learning something from it. So if you have questions you want to ask at any point along the way, just raise your hand. And if I don't notice, Cameron or Brian will then let me know. So let me go back to this again. So the problem, the way I've learned to think about problems is that people don't spend money to get into something. They spend money to get out of something. So you got to figure out, what is the pain you take away? The hard part is, a lot of us are positive individuals who like to talk about, here's the gain, as you might hear. But it's not just about the gain. To get people's attention and to pique their interest, you have to tell them how you're going to take away a pain that they have. What is it you're going to remove? What are you going to take away? So when you hear other people talk about a value proposition, I often call this a 7-second sale. My argument is I can start a conversation with almost anybody about any product, and I can do it in less than 7 seconds. The way that you do this is like the way that people used to build bridges in the old days. In the old days, you'd have one person on one side of the valley with a bow and arrow. You'd have someone on the other side of the valley where they want to build a bridge, and they're hiding in the bushes. And what happens is the person on this side of the valley would shoot the arrow across the valley. The person on the other side would grab the arrow, and attached to the arrow was some thread. And when you pulled on the thread, at the end of the thread, there was some string. And when you pulled on the string, at the end of the string, there was some rope. And now you got the rope across the valley. You can tie it across the tree or around a tree on the other side of the valley. Now you can start sending all these materials back and forth. You can build a bridge. There is no way you can throw that rope all the way across the valley. You want to just throw something on the other side to let people pull on it. So what I've learned is to focus on a very specific customer. It's what I often call an ideal client profile. You then want to use a verb, and these are the 6 verbs I like to use: avoid, prevent, reduce, minimize, mitigate, eliminate, or anything like this. Whatever it is, one of those 3 problems that you talked about. The other way to get to this is by using the value proposition canvas. So there's the gains, there's the customer jobs, but for me, the big thing is the pains or the problem. What do you take away that makes someone ask the question, how do you do that? Do you want to add anything here, Brian, before I go on?
Go ahead. You're doing great.
Okay. And part of the value of this is if you focus on the people that are motivated, your business will grow faster. So one of the things I'll try to do on occasion is I'll leave behind some links to other resources that maybe you want to go look at. But there was something down way back in July, August 2012 by some really smart people from McKinsey that talked about the fact that you grow faster if you sell into a smaller market. The way I hear this described by a really smart lady named Jill Conrath is the narrower your focus, the fatter your wallet. So how do we find a way to narrow our focus? And I'll share with you a process I use called bifurcation questions that allow me to focus on a smaller portion of the marketplace so I can be more successful. The next piece is around understanding what are all the different ways that people can solve the same problem. Bob Moesta talks about this from the perspective of jobs to be done. Renee Malborn and W. Chan Kim and some of the stuff they do for Blue Ocean Strategies. The way I bastardize what they say is it's called, what is your competition? Not who are your competitors. Let me give you an example. Let's pretend we all owned a jewelry store on Market Street in downtown San Francisco. Well, how many are on this call, Brian? 25, 30?
Yeah, you got 29 with us right now.
So we got 29 people. So all 29 of us all own our own jewelry store on Market Street within several blocks of each other. We're all doing $5 million in revenue. What do we compete against? Who wants to put in the chat? What do we compete against? All of us own these $5 million. Florists, that's actually a really good answer. Yes, competing against florists, because guess what? So who tends to spend more money on jewelry, men or women? Anybody want to guess? Who spends more money on jewelry? Man. Who do men buy it for? They buy it for women. When do we spend money on jewelry for women? When we want to say, I love you or I'm sorry. The question is, what else could someone spend money on other than jewelry? Flowers, someone picked flowers. What else could we do other than flowers? Who wants to put something in here? Flowers. I'm sure some of you get this on occasion. Yes, chocolates. What's next? You want to guess? Food, maybe. Perfume, cars, purses, pets, shoes, trips. It's my 10-year anniversary. My wife and I are foodies. She plays French horn for the orchestra. If I want to date with my wife on a Friday or Saturday night, I have to book it 6 months in advance. So what did I decide to do for my 10-year anniversary? I took my wife to the place in the bottom right-hand corner. It's called San Sebastian, Spain. There are more Michelin-rated restaurants in San Sebastian, Spain than anywhere else on the planet except for Tokyo. What did I do? I found the most expensive hotel with an amazing view right on the beach. Unlike any really good husband, what did I make for dinner for our anniversary? We want to guess what I made for dinner for our anniversary? Reservations, totally right. First place we reserved is called Zubeira. It's a 1-star Michelin-rated restaurant. Before we left, we had dinner here. Arzak, at the time, was the number 16 restaurant on the planet. So it's really important to understand that you can't say to somebody, we have no competition. You always have competition. So at this point, I want to pass it off to Brian to touch a little bit on this whole jobs to be done, because the job to be done was to say to someone, I'm happy I married you, I love you, or I'm sorry. Brian, do you want to take it from here a little bit? I can just tell me when to move to the next slide.
Will do. Thank you. So, as many of you know, each week we want to get some hands-on, right? We want to get exercises so you actually get to experience some of these tools we're talking about. And this concept that some of you might have heard before, jobs to be done, right? What's the problem, the want, the pain, the gains, is Craig talked about. How can we visualize this? How can we help you to figure out, gather insights, and document what this job to be done is by your potential customers? Here's an example. Clayton Christian, one of the founders of this concept of jobs to be done. You know, as Craig mentioned, kind of a verb and action, right? When I need to say I love you, I want to say I love you so I can what? Get in good graces. You can go to the next slide. We need to understand, what job am I trying to get done in that situation, right? And it's not just about the functional thing that your product or service does. When you think about jobs to be done at a high level, there are 3 areas that you need to think about. That someone has a choice, to Craig's point, of an existing alternative. There's always there's competition. It might not be a direct competitor, but there's competition. And the first one is functional, right? So I have this Hydro Flask, and the function of this is to keep my beverage cold. Very simple. But we are humans. We have emotional and social needs too. So not everything we buy or do is just very functional. We also have emotional jobs and social jobs we want to get done. Why did I buy blue? Well, blue's my favorite color. So that resonates with me emotionally when I bought this versus a black or a white or a gray one. So what we want to understand is our customer segments, and hopefully even better, early adopters. What are their jobs they're trying to get done with this potential problem or pain they have? Next slide. As Craig mentioned, the value proposition canvas, to me, is one of the best tools to visualize these problems, these jobs to get done. And as you see right here, it says customer jobs. This tool, how it works is on the right-hand side, if you've not seen it before, is we call the customer profile. This is the customer's jobs, their gains they hope to get, and the pains they're worried about. And on this left-hand side over here is you. This is your company, your new startup, the product and services literally that you want to sell, and the features that create gains and the features that relieve pains for customers. The goal of this tool is for you to be able to align these so that you could draw literally an arrow and a line from a gain creator to a gain, a pain reliever to a pain, and that gets to problem solution fit. So when we talk about this idea of problem solution fit, It's in this case, a literal thing that we're trying to map what we do to the customer's jobs, pains, and gains. And this is a visual tool that helps you do that versus just having in your head, which is very difficult. Most of us are visual. And so what we're going to do, and next slide, go to the next slide, is show you an example before we get into an exercise. So Tesla, I'm sure all of you know Tesla. When they first started looking at coming out with a Tesla sports car, first thing they did was figure out, okay, who is our target market? Who are we going after? Upper middle class males, so very specific with income over $100,000, right? What are the jobs that they were trying to get done? This male that has a high income. Well, they want to be different from others, very social, emotional. They want to be able to go on long trips, very functional, convey an image of success, again, emotional, social, have personal mobility, very functional, be able to commute to work, very functional. What are gains, things that you want to have happen if you get these jobs done, if you're this person? Well, you want brand recognition, you want high safety ratings, you want compliments from friends, you want cool design, you want it to perform like a sports car, you want the battery technology from this electric vehicle to last a long time, and you want to be able to put more than just a couple of people in the car. If you're this electric vehicle person, what are you worried about? Well, you're worried about accident and harm because it hasn't had any longitudinal testing. You're worried about frequent charging of a battery and the battery going dead in the middle of nowhere and the lack of charging stations, and buyer's remorse, right? For anything new that's like this, high tech, just like when the first smartphone came out, you're worried about it being a lot of money, then all of a sudden 6 months later the price drops, so you don't want to get stuck like that. This is the jobs to be done, the customer profile of what Tesla was trying to help this person overcome. On the left-hand side, what you see here are the literal features, high touch screen, sleek design, very fast, charging network, be able to have multiple people in the car. These map directly over to the pains and gains. This helps you get to problem solution fit with your customer base and early adopters, right? It takes several iterations. It takes a lot of customer discovery and interviews and talking to people and prospects, but this helps you visualize and then to prioritize what are the most important jobs. So what we're going to do now is to go into some breakout rooms and have you guys try and do this. So Craig, Cameron, and myself are going to be kind of your scribes and helpers in each of these breakout rooms on Miro board. And we're going to use DoorDash as the example. So think of, if you haven't used DoorDash, right, Grubhub, any food delivery service, and we're going to look at just the customer profile, the right-hand side. What is the job us as a user of a food delivery service is trying to get done? And then what are the gains we hope to have? And what are the pains that we're really worried about if we use this type of service? And that will hopefully, give you some feeling much more comfortable at using a tool like this. Cameron, I'm going to turn it to you so you can talk us through the breakout room.
Yeah, I just want to pause real quick and see if there's any questions for Brian or Craig before we hop into the breakout rooms. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question or throw it into the chat and we can bring it in.
We have a poll up for some reason, Cameron.
I did not launch a poll.
How important do you feel accountability is in the workplace? That's what I see, at least. Anybody else see this?
You might have clicked it. You might have clicked it yourself. So,
okay, my apologies. I don't know how I did that.
All good. Vanessa, it looks like you unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I do. So this is actually my first class. I didn't get the chance to know about it last week. I guess my question would be, for value prop canvas, do we always have to have a customer profile in mind at least first?
Yeah, so there's two pieces to this. One, it can help you actually validate your assumptions of who you think your customer segments are, early adopters, who they might be. So you need to go out and actually test, right, and interview and gather insights. And you can come back and say, oh, that wasn't right. Or it's also later on then your ability to use that to confirm all those findings. So most of us as founders, you're going to have some preconceived notion of who you're trying to sell this idea to, right? That is what you want to list here. What do I think these jobs are from these people I think have this problem? That's your assumption though. And assumptions are really bad. We have to go out and test those. So then you need to go out and test and validate all these things that you think are their jobs, their pains, and their gains, and get feedback from the customer prospects themselves.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I think so. If I can validate that, we start with a hypothesis who we think our customer is. And then we go away and we see if what we're saying resonates with those people. And that it usually either means that we have to say the same thing to a different person, or we have to say a different thing to the same person. That for me is the testing of a value proposition. Because people just go, if I can just say the same thing to everybody, everybody wants to become my customer. But unfortunately, that doesn't work. One of the reasons I find that's the case is that words have different meanings. So if I use the word baler, Vanessa, if you lived in a farm community, do you know what a baler is or what a baler does?
Kind of.
That bales hay, right? If you happen to live in San Francisco and you owned a boat, what does a baler do now? Do you know?
Like the moving part, I guess, where that helps the boat move.
No, it bails water out of a boat.
Ah, okay.
Two totally different things. Now, let me just pretend you live in a crime-ridden town. Now, what does a baler mean?
Probably a weapon or something.
Someone who gets you out of jail. So that baler. So it is really important to have the customer in mind, because even just a single word can mean a bunch of different things to different people.
Yeah.
That's the way
That's kind of a mind game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
So it resonates. Anything else, Cameron, before we?
No, I was just going to give space for if there was maybe one additional question. And if not, then we can hop into the breakout room.
Again, we'll use DoorDash, and we will let you guys tell us what to write down. So we'll go 10 minutes, and then we'll get back together.
All right. I'm opening the breakout room. So if you don't see anything, you're staying in this room with me.
Very good.
And Craig, you'll look at the bottom and go to breakouts because you'll hop into one.
Let me go find it in here. So hold on. It's in here somewhere. This is the challenge when you only have one screen. It's like, where is that?
Totally. Well, maybe I'll stop your share. That might help you out.
There we go. More breakout rooms. Thank you.
All righty.
Which breakout room am I in? Breakout room 2.
Be in breakout room number 2.
Am I in room 2? I don't see myself.
Yep. If you just click the number and click join, then you should be good.
Okay, hold on. Join. Here we go.
All righty. Awesome. All righty. Well, you're all with me here, and let me move this that way. So we got till 55. All righty. So we're using DoorDash as an example for our exercise here, confirming you can see the Miro board with the value prop canvas. Can I get a thumbs up? We got some head shakes. Cool, cool. All righty. So we're going to start with the customer jobs. So what are some customer jobs for DoorDash? If we're thinking of, I guess the first thing we have to decide as a group is DoorDash is a platform business. So it has the business, which is the restaurant, which is partly a customer, and then you have the user as well, who's actually ordering the food. So as a group, we have to first start with who we want to define in our canvas as our customer. Lisa, go ahead.
How about the food orderer?
The food orderer sounds like a plan. So we'll do that. We'll do customer segment, food orderer. All righty. All right. So what's the first job that we're trying to achieve as the food orderer? So we can look at these again. Remember, they're functional, social, and emotional jobs that our food orderer is trying to have fulfilled.
Picking up food.
So they're trying to pick up food. right? Trying to get food. Okay. That's the only job they're trying to have.
Give
fulfilled.
options of different types of foods.
Okay. So viewing. So I guess maybe what about having choice of options?
Yeah, having choice. I feel like I should give somebody else a chance to speak.
Yeah, no worries. Vanessa, any thoughts on some jobs to be done? So we got a couple functional ones, right? We've got picking up food, having choice. What other functional, right? So thinking of social and emotional jobs.
Being tired, I guess.
So so if someone's tired, making it easier or like having an efficient.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Um,
like efficiency, I guess, maybe then.
okay. So let's try to think of how best to put that into the document here. So efficiency, a quick process for accessing food.
Avoid cooking.
Love that. Avoid cooking. It's the job I know I'm trying to get done. Is that all we got? If that's all we got. We can certainly move on to the gains and the pains as well.
I'd say a gain is to try something different.
New. Okay, so a gain is an ability to see new options.
Yep.
Okay.
Have
Gain.
food. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Yeah, go
Vanessa.
ahead.
Have food just delivered to their door. That's quick and easy.
Yep. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say remain on the sofa.
Yeah. That's a
Be
good
lazy.
one.
so you don't have to go anywhere, right?
Mhm.
So what else would that allow them to do? Does that like give you more time to spend with family or pets or get more life things done, right? So thinking of that, like, right, we're doing something to help solve a particular problem, right? The functional is like, I want to get food, right? But well, you could go, you could call a friend and say, hey, can you go pick this up for me, right? That's an alternative. You could certainly drive somewhere and pick it up or go through fast food. But what does that enable you to do as a gain, right? What are some of those other things that might give you?
It frees up your time. Makes you a hero to your kids to get something that you're not cooking. At least
Okay.
my kids.
I like it. Hero to family. All right. I was going to say for non-cookers, but it's maybe not the right term. Okay. So maybe what are some of the fears or the pains that might come with DoorDash? And I know I've experienced some of these.
Like receiving DoorDash?
Right. Yeah, we're the food orderer. So what would so thinking of that Tesla example, right? They're afraid that if they might run out of battery and then no place to charge, right? So like what are some of those pains?
That the deliverer is going to eat the food.
Right.
That they're going to spit on the food.
So maybe the food won't come.
Or the food will come, but it's not so appetizing.
Kim said a good one, I think. Pay more money and receive the wrong order, cold food.
Nice. So I got one in the chat. So
check box.
contaminated
Yes,
food,
that happened.
unsanitary. Sorry, I just saw the chat. So for those of you that were throwing in there, I'll add those in. COVID transmission. So that's definitely one to be thinking about. I'm going to add contaminated, and maybe just cold.
Mhm.
What about
Cost, too much.
I know one to like think of the when you're checking out, there's always a question that's asked for the dasher.
Oh, the tip?
Yeah, so I'm always like, how much do you tip? Or like, that's it.
Well, yeah, you don't know if they've done a good job yet.
So the tipping question. So let's see if there's any. So we got in the chat, pay more for food, receive the wrong order. That's a good one. Receive the wrong order. Order. Let's see options to pay for food and delivery food, time efficient delivery. Nice. Convenience. Good, good, good. All right. So how do we feel about our canvas here? We feel like we captured the jobs to be done of the food orderer, the pains that we would ultimately want to help relieve them of, and then the gains that they're able to receive by getting that particular product or service.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So one of the key things that we can use as we're doing the value proposition canvas is similar to the conversation that Craig and Vanessa were having. Like, this is really powerful for finding out language and what really makes our customers tick, right? And so thinking about the selling process of, okay, well, we know people want to be able to get food delivered to them, right? That's the most functional thing. But if we're able to articulate to them that, hey, that empowers you to be the hero of your family, they get the food of choice in a convenient way. But we do recognize that, we feel like cost is a barrier or something, right? And so if there's ways that you can start to create ends around that particular pain that people might be feeling to help alleviate some of that, right? And so like in the Tesla example, they could talk about, hey, we're going to build a really dense network of these superchargers, or maybe in the DoorDash, if you get the wrong order, we have great customer service and we'll provide you with DoorDash bucks or something of that sort, right? Or in the tipping question, maybe we give you recommended tips as a part of that, right? And so helping alleviate any challenges that might face for you. So as I'll call them back now, want to see if there's any questions you have or ideas or thoughts as we in the exercise. If not, no worries as well. I'll stop the share. Has anyone done a value proposition canvas before? There you go. You were working on it as we were going. I see you. Kim has. Kim, tell us about your experience in doing your value proposition canvas. Did you find it valuable?
I did. What I used it mostly for was, once I finished, is to actually complete the business plan, because it seems like everyone still wants the 60-page business plan anyway, if you're looking for funding.
Interesting.
But
Awesome.
it kind of was like almost like an outline for it.
Terrific. Thank you, Kim. Take it away, Brian and Craig.
Yeah, well, just a quick recap. How did everyone find the exercise? So usually takes people a second to get comfortable and blurt out some answers. So how are the other two rooms? You guys kind of find your mojo and feel good about it? Craig, any comments? How'd it go?
No, I think it went well. We came up with some really good things. We got them all documented. It took a little while. I find sometimes as a facilitator, I have to call people out.
Yes.
Hey, you with the glasses and the gray beard, like, you don't do it. Tell me why. So, and I think part of this as an exercise, I'm very familiar with something called psychological safety. Like, how do you find a way to create an environment where people feel comfortable actually saying something, even though it may or may not be right? So if you try to do this with a group, that's one of those things. How do you just collect all the ideas and go, that one's good, let's go build on that idea? So I thought we had some really good comments.
Good.
It was stuff around, I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to have to get dressed.
Yep.
It was COVID. I don't feel safe leaving the house. So there was lots of really good stuff like that.
Very good. And that's the goal here for all of you, is not to get the right answers, but to do the brainstorming ideation of this exercise. So when you go back and do it yourself with your stakeholders and team, you kind of know how to do it, right? And you can train them on, okay, let's just, what do we think? Who are the target market? Who are the prospects? And those were all our assumptions, right? Those were our hypotheses we have. This is the job, I think, here, and this is the pain here, and this is the gain here. Now we have to go out and we have to validate these things, as Craig was talking about. We have to gather the insights, and which we can dig into later on, but we have to then prioritize what jobs are most important and what pains and gains are more important, because they're not all equal. We don't pay the same amount of money to get a specific job done. We pay for the most important jobs to get done, right? So we can only understand that by really digging into the problem, the customer, and that, as Craig's talking about. So we'll do another exercise in a little bit. Hopefully you feel more comfortable with these tools now and can use these as an entrepreneur. Craig,
Yeah,
back to you to share your screen.
I want to add something though to this point of you talk about what's important. But so if it's super important, but only happens once a year, it's not often that people change behavior. But if it's something they do on a regular basis, whether it's every month or every week or every day, the more often something happens means it's usually something that then becomes more important, or people tend to spend more time on. So let me just try sharing my screen again. Desktop 2. I'm going to go like this. This is the way that I come at this. Can you see my screen, Brian?
We cannot see it.
Hold on, I just need to say share. I'm missing the extra step. How about now?
Now we get it.
There we go. So I come at this when I help entrepreneurs put together a competition slide. This is what most people think about. Here are the things that we do. Here are the things that our nearest competitors do, which is, how do you find a way to be better? But in the words of the Blue Ocean strategy authors, this is what's called a bloody red ocean. It is super hard to say anything like, if I owned a jewelry store next to all of you, there's not much I can say that you can't say the exact same thing. So one of the things that I always try to think of is, how do we find a different form of competition? How do we find completely different alternatives that are used on a very regular basis? And how do we find a way to be different from the competition, not better than the competition? So before there was like an alternative to DoorDash might be eating out. It might be frozen pizzas. So one of the things I always try to say is, if you're working on how do you look at jobs to be done on alternatives, what is something that's very commonly used, and how can you find a portion of that marketplace that's unhappy with the way it's done? I'm also a big believer of finding the most expensive way that this is done and finding a way to be less expensive than the most expensive way. Don't try and find a way to be less expensive than the nearest competitor, but find a way to be cheaper than the most expensive way of solving this problem. I'm going to tell you a story about Julie. This is Julie. Julie is an adventurer. She once rode to Australia through 2 different hurricanes. Now, what Julie makes are these ocean-going drones. So when I had some time to do some pitch coaching with Julie, because she was in a pitch competition, and first prize was $100,000, we spent a lot of time on a pitch. She had 2 minutes for a pitch, which means you really need to understand your competition. Julie did a rock solid job of understanding her competition. She understood that these ocean-going drones that take all these measurements about the ocean, the currents, the pollutants, and everything else, the most expensive way that's done today is using research ships. which is something like $18,000 an hour to run a research ship. Julie now replaces a lot of these research ships. Business to consumer sales are not that easy. Business to business is hard. Business to government is really hard. She looked at the most expensive form of competition and is displacing that form of competition. The thing that's also commonly used, the way she does something different, is by competing against these navigation buoys that are all over the place. They have no maneuverability. Yes, there are other drones, but she doesn't focus on competing against other drone manufacturers. So I was coaching Julie to get involved in this pitch competition. First prize is $100,000. The day before she gets on a plane to come to Calgary to be in that pitch competition, she's in a different pitch competition for $100,000. She sent me a check, a picture of the check that she won $100,000 before she got on the plane and came to Calgary. She came to Calgary. She was in a second $100,000 pitch competition. What do you think happened on the second day? She won. She won 2 different $100,000 pitch competitions just by having a really good understanding of the jobs to be done and her competition. If you want to understand this a little bit better, this is an old article. I want to say it's from like 2006. Brian, do you remember when this one was from?
Yeah, 2005 is when the book came out, and actually just before that with the article.
Yeah. So, and it's like 12 pages. I think it's the best $9.95 you will spend understanding your competition. The next thing is focusing on customers. And I want to make sure that I help people understand the difference between a customer and a user. Does anybody want to guess what's the big difference between a customer and a user? Let me give you an example. Let's pretend there are lots of families where there are aging parents that live in a different city, and there's lots of services for these aging parents. Who's the customer for these services? Anybody want to unmute themselves and guess? Who's the customer?
Person who pays.
The person who pays. And in this case, Lisa, it turns out more times than not, it's not the older, it's not the parents that are aging. It's generally the oldest daughter or the last person to leave the house. So it's really important when we're doing our analysis, there's no shortage of people that want to use something, but there is a shortage of people that will actually pay for something. So I have 2 different approaches around how do I identify my ideal client profile. And I want to give you a couple of different examples. One I'll give you right away, and if we have time, we'll do a second one. So we've got a phone call from a guy who's heard that I'm good at this. He phones me up and he tells me that he has this really interesting piece of equipment that makes hockey gear smell less. So if anybody, if you have kids that play football, let's say it's football gear instead of hockey gear, but in Canada it's hockey gear. And he's like, the target market is parents. Well, my first question to him was, it is not parents. Stinky hockey gear or stinky football gear. Who cares more about the stinky gear, the moms or the dads? Who wants to guess? Who cares more about stinky hockey or stinky football gear? Moms. So we asked one question and we split the audience into 2. Now we're focused on one portion of this. So I'm going to stick with the hockey example for now. So you can have moms that have kids that are over the age of 13 that play hockey or under the age of 13. Which moms are more motivated? Those that have kids that are over 13 or under 13? Anybody want to guess?
Under.
Under. What makes you say under?
Because for the older ones, their moms are probably going to ask them to take care of the stinky hockey sticks.
Good question. My argument to you is that teenagers stink more than kids under 12. So what do we just learn? It's moms of teenagers. Here's my third bifurcation question. Do these teenagers play hockey 3 times a week or more, or 2 times a week or less? Cameron says 3 times a week or more. But why do you say that, Cameron?
I just think the cadence is higher, and doing laundry at that pace is a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, the gear doesn't have time to dry before the next game shows up. So all we did was ask 3 simple bifurcation questions that helped us understand it's not parents, it's moms of teenagers that play hockey 3 times a week or more. The other example I have, same sort of way. Someone came to me a while ago, was in a program for consumer packaged goods, and they have chemical-free cleaners. They're like, parents are my target market. It's not parents, it's moms. Okay. And the question then becomes, is it moms of 5 kids or moms of 1 kid? People go, it's 5 kids. I'm like, no, it's 1 kid, because if your first kid doesn't die with chemicals underneath the sink, you don't worry about your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th kid. So it's moms with 1 kid. But then here's my last question, which I'm hoping somebody can answer. We know it's moms with 1 child. The question is, the moms that are more likely to buy, are they over 35 or under 35?
Over.
Over. What makes you say over, Lisa?
They read more books about it.
Well, they may, but maybe at the age of 35 or 36, or in my wife's case, 40, you finally get pregnant, you're going to make damn sure nothing happens to that kid, because you might not get a chance to have a second one. In fact, when I was still living in San Francisco and my wife was pregnant, I came home every 10 or 14 days just to change the cat litter, because I bought this semi-automatic cat litter machine, took all the cat litter, put it in a bin at the end. I come over every couple of weeks, take it away, because there's something in cat litter that can affect babies. So focusing on the ideal audience, all you need is 3 of these bifurcation questions. Now, in the case of business to business, I tend to think of different people that are as far up on an organization as possible. People that have money, authority, and influence. They can make a decision right away, tell people to get stuff done. We need to understand, where did these guys and gals come from? Well, they come from 2 different places. They either start with a smaller company that grows, or they get headhunted into a larger company, or they get promoted inside the organization. The same thing, this guy or gal on the very far left, the CFO of this $5 to $10 million manufacturing company, where do they come from? And what I do is I build out this hierarchy of my ideal client. And then what I wait for are job changes. Because somebody who's new in their job wants to prove they're better than the person who was there before. So I actually use tools like LinkedIn that go, oh, Brian's new in his job. He's going to want to stir things up. These people are often referred to as mobilizers. There's a book called The Challenger's Sale. I don't agree with much of the book, but the one thing I do agree with this whole thing around this group called mobilizers. Guys or gals that are new in their job are the people that tend to make changes. These are the people that are your ideal clients. The changing jobs part are the early adopters. Just because someone is a CFO for a manufacturing company that's $10 to $20 million doesn't make them an early adopter. That just is that's the ideal client. The early adopter is these people that are new in their job, which is the next part we have to figure out, not just this whole group, but who's going to become our customer in the next little while. It is not about finding the total market of these VPs, CEOs, or moms. It's not the ones that have a problem you can address. It's not even the people you can reach. It is all about finding the people that are motivated. These are the early adopters you want to get to. For me, I'm super fortunate that in 2002, I was working for a company called WorldCom. I joined them the day before 9/11. 9/11 happens. Of course, most people can't sell anything, but like has happened for 20 years in my sales career, I got lucky, and in less than 6 months, I was the #1 sales guy in the entire country. But unfortunately, 21 days later, they admitted conducting all this accounting fraud. And for the first time in my life, nobody wanted to buy from me. So what I did was I looked back at my luck as a sales guy. When was I good? When was I great? When was I just unstoppable? And I reflected on all my 6, 7, 8-figure deals. And I noticed a really interesting pattern that nobody was talking about back then. That when you talk to a lot of consumers or business people, They're in this buying mode of status quo. Their expectations are equal to the performance of what it is that they currently use today. But then something happens. Either something happens and raises their expectations, or something happens and lowers their perception of the performance of what they're using today. So all of a sudden, one day somebody has an event. Now they want to change. They're thinking of changing. I call this a window of dissatisfaction. People now begin to define the problem that they have. They then begin to decide on the version of the solution that they're going to use to solve this problem. But just because somebody wants to buy something and has decided how they're going to solve the problem, they don't do anything about it yet until they have a second event. They have a second event, now they can afford more time to look at something, or now they have more money to buy something. Then they actively start looking at all the different vendors in that industry or in that sector. Like when I decided I was going to go to San Sebastian, Spain, looking at all the restaurants, which ones am I going to pick? But people need to have a third event before they actually change. Just because they want to change and can't afford to change doesn't mean they'll change. Because there's a third piece that needs to happen. They have to have a third event. They have to find a way to justify the decision to themselves or other people. If I was at home right about now, I would pull out of my computer bag the first iPhone, the iPhone 2 that was made. I found an iPhone 2 once on eBay. It was $660 US. They shipped to Canada. It runs on the GSM network. Fido was my provider back then. And that I could find some software and hack into this phone to make it work in Canada. But when I showed this phone to my wife, this really nice first iPhone that ever came out, I couldn't buy it. I couldn't buy it because my wife is Scottish and we don't throw anything away. And my wife said to me, "What are you going to do with your old phone?" And I couldn't do anything because I didn't know what I was going to do with my old phone. And about 3 months later, my son, who was about 2.5 years old at the time, without any guidance from his dad, found my wife's really nice Motorola flip phone. And what did he do? He broke it in half. And I went to my wife. I said, "Here, dear, you can have my really nice Sony Ericsson phone. It has 10-day battery life." The difference was, though my son broke the phone, now all of a sudden I could justify the purchase. People generally justify the purchase based upon 5 things. I call them ripes. And what I find really interesting is Brian's going to share with you something called a buyer. What's the buyer? What's it called map, Brian? I forgot what it's called.
Buyer utility map.
Buyer utility map. And it's funny because my 5 things from like 2002 are actually on the left side of the buyer utility map. Risk avoidance, image, productivity or expenses, environmentally friendliness, simplicity or speed. So this was what I figured out. But then I couldn't figure something out. How could somebody be in the buying mode of status quo on Monday, be in the window of dissatisfaction on Wednesday, and start searching for alternatives on Friday? What was different? What had changed? And I realized it was this. This is a married man who every day wakes up older, heavier, grayer, and balder. But he doesn't go away and buy Rogaine and make his hair grow back until he has a very specific event. What's the event that makes a middle-aged man all of a sudden go buy Rogaine? Anybody want to guess?
Women,
Sorry?
women maybe?
Women, or the fact he gets
Women.
divorced. Like all of a sudden he's single. It's like, oh, I've let myself go. You know what I should do? I should go to the drugstore and buy Rogaine. So he leaves the house and he's on his way to the drugstore. But before he gets to the drugstore, he goes by gym. What does he say? Well, if I put on some weight, I better take it off. So I sign up for a gym membership. He's still on his way to the drugstore. Then he goes by a men's store where they'll sell suits. He's like, well, if I'm going to lose weight, I better buy new suits. He goes to the drugstore, buys the Rogaine. If you're European, I think it's called Regain. But between the drugstore and his house, what is there? There's a Corvette dealership, and he buys himself a brand new car. all of that stuff happens because of one single event.
Midlife crisis?
Midlife crisis. But here's a question I want to ask you. I've talked to a bunch of people in the insurance industry. What do you think is the one event, just one, that causes more people to buy life insurance than all of the other events combined?
A death in the family.
Not even close.
Having a kid.
Having a baby.
Having a baby. The nanoseconds you pee on a stick and there's a blue or red strip, what do? Life insurance, a will. You move out of your apartment, you buy a house, you give up your Mazda 323, you buy a Subaru station wagon. There's all these events behind the scenes. The good news is, I think about this from a business to business perspective. McKinsey came 7 years after me and figured out the exact same thing from a business to consumer perspective. People are in this loyalty loop. They buy the same thing, buy the same thing, buy the same thing until something triggers their interest to do something different. That creates the initial consideration set. If you don't get to them here and they choose a different way to solve the problem, you're lost. Then what McKinsey says, at some point later, there's a trigger that they then decide on. The only thing I think McKinsey misses is this trigger in the middle where people have more money or have more time. I'll give you an example. I know a guy who at one point all of a sudden took up the sport of Olympic rowing. Why would he all of a sudden take up Olympic rowing? I know this guy really well because it's me. Do you know why I took up Olympic rowing? I met a girl. Her name was Debbie. She was an Olympic rower. I took up the sport so we could spend more time together. 10 years later, I met a lady who all of a sudden stopped road riding and decided to start mountain biking. Why would she start mountain biking?
She met a guy.
She met a guy. His name is Craig, and Marion gave up road riding and took up mountain biking. All of these things, like it happens all the time. McKinsey came out even a few years later from their own research and said that 70% of the time, it's the first person they talked to when they built the initial consideration set that they actually bought from. Even GE, like Beth's no longer there. She says it doesn't matter if you're selling refrigerators to consumers or jet engines to airline companies. It's all about understanding these events and being the first person they talk to in the process. So I'm going to give you my version of the A's, B's, and C's of these events. People have an event, okay, makes them want to change. The first one we try an awareness strategy. I'm better, I'm faster, I'm cheaper. It just doesn't work. The economics doesn't work. If you can help people understand it's a way to avoid risk, that happens. If they have to change because there's a new legislation, you help them become aware of that, that works. The second one is a bad experience. Whatever their current provider is, usually a change in people, sometimes a change in the product. I know that when I got to a certain point with Windows, they're like, no, you have to move to Vista. I'm like, I don't have to move to Vista. I'll go buy a Mac. And that's the day I moved to a Mac. I have not looked back. Or it's some sort of material change in that provider. They get bad press or get sued or something of that nature. The hard part about a bad experience is you don't always know when it happens. This is why I love a change inside the customer's world, a change in people, a change in places, or a change in priorities. These are the things that we can tap into to help us understand who are our early adopters. One of the ways that I understood this was what I'd done in that summer 2002. I'd done something different than I'd ever done before as a salesperson. Because for almost 20 years, I had sales managers that had this perspective. If you lose the business, you don't want to lose the lesson. So for almost 20 years, I analyzed the deals or sales that I lost. But that summer 2002, I did something totally different. I analyzed the customers or the sales that I'd won. Now, I was curious to see, what other research was out there or resources were out there around this whole approach of analyzing the deals you lose. So I went to Google, I typed between quotes the words lost sales analysis. So that phrase between quotes, the importance of the quotes, it's those three words together in that order. So when I did a Google search for lost sales analysis, I found 50,000 pages on the internet in 2002. But when I took out the word lost and replaced it with the word won, W-O-N, when I did Google search for the phrase won sales analysis, does anyone want to guess how many pages there were on the internet in 2002 that talked about how to replicate your biggest and best wins by analyzing the deals you win? Anybody want to guess?
0.
Zero.
There were 2, only 2. So when you get a customer, my argument is you want to ask a few key questions. First question is, when you get someone as a customer, you want to ask them what event or what events led up to this purchase. The problem I've learned with that question is that when you ask question number 1, they tell you about event number 2. Event number 2 was then they could afford to change. And at that point, they'd already decided what they were going to buy. So I've learned I had to ask a second question. I had to find a way to get there sooner. So my second question is, when did these events happen? And what we're trying to figure out is, what was the very first event that made them unhappy with what they have today? My third question is, what made you choose us? I don't ask why questions. What I have been taught and what I believe is that why questions make people defensive. So I've learned to ask what or how questions. So my question is, what made you choose us? And when I ask this question, I am listening for a very specific type of word. What I'm listening for is I'm listening for verbs. Verbs describe the value or the outcome someone got by being my customer. So now when we're trying to do our value proposition work, those verbs are what we need to understand and then say to the next people, because someone said, oh, I bought for you because the battery lasted longer than the competition. Oh, great. Understand that a little bit more. So there are all these driving forces for change. RIPES is the way that I think of them. What's interesting is there's a super cool guy named Kurt Lewin who's realized it's not just about creating more forces for change, but it's about understanding all the forces against that change. And how do you find a way to take away the things that are preventing people from becoming your customers? So one of the things I've learned is I need to ask question number 4, because there's a certain amount of effort required to become my customer. And if people's motivation gets below that level, they're not going to do anything about it. So one of my favorite questions is, how can we make it easier to become our customer? There's a really cool guy named BJ Fogg, F-O-G-G. He talks about these things called motivation waves. And what he argues is that when someone's motivation is high, you need to give them something hard to do instead of giving them something hard to do later. I have an old customer I haven't talked to for at least 10 years, but they're an office furniture company. People would show up in the showroom, and what the salespeople were learned or taught to ask was, what brought you in today? And what they had everybody do before they left is they filled in a credit application before they left while they were really motivated. So later on, when things got busy, that part of the work was already done. When the customer was talking to 3 vendors and one can ship tomorrow because the credit application has already been done, that's the one that got the business. How can we make it easier to be our customer? The last thing I think we need to do a really good job of is when we get them as a customer, how do we keep them as a customer? So for me, it's really important to ask a question like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with the purchase? And if somebody gives us an 8, what should our next question be?
Why not 9 or 10?
What can we do to get you to 10?
What can we do to get you to 10? It's not how can we make it better? How can we make it a 10? So at this point, because there seems to be a lot of alignment between what Kurt Lewin talks about and what's over in here and the buyer utility map, which is some of the early work done by Renee Malborn and W. Chen Kim. Brian's going to walk us through a little bit of work on the bioutility lifecycle. Brian, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So what you're seeing on the screen now is another tool we can use as entrepreneurs to visualize and understand the customer's journey, to get to these pain points, right? To go out and then validate what we think are our hypotheses and assumptions. As Craig was talking about, what he just showed you was the customer journey, the triggering events, the pains that that potential customer has. And when the Kurt Lewin, you have the forces on the left and the reasons we buy on the right, the competing. This helps us visualize that journey. What we want to do is put ourselves in the customer's shoes, right? Pretend we're them, help us understand the pains they go through or where the opportunities might be that the industry or our competitors are not taking advantage of. And where is this new space for us as a startup and entrepreneur that we can take advantage of? And what the bioutility lifecycle is, the tool, on the left, we have 6 utility levers. Pretty much anything we buy, product or service, we buy to solve one or more of these problems we had, right? These pain points. I want something to be more productive. I want things simpler, more convenient, to reduce my risk. I want increased fun and image, or I want it to be environmentally friendly. We buy products and services to fill these needs, usually more than one. The most common is to be productive, something. Every product or service in the world has a buyer life cycle. And there's usually 6 stages. If you have something really unique and crazy, great, you can put it in there. But purchase, pre-sales as well, to disposal. We buy a product or service, it gets delivered, we use it, we have supplements, we maintain something, and we dispose of something. That could be all at once for an experience, or it could be over many, many years if it's like a car. But the question is, you and your industry, where do you focus? Or the people that you're trying to disrupt, you as an entrepreneur, you're trying to create new market space. And if you're the next Airbnb or Uber, right, you're trying to fill in this unmet demand. Walking through this journey helps us understand where opportunities and pains currently could be within a specific industry. So what we do here is we start on the left-hand side and say, okay, for this industry, not a specific company, but this industry, whatever that is, why does somebody, when they purchase something, is there a pain somewhere? Whether it's because of risk, fun and image, environmentally friendly, are there any pains you see in that industry, whatever that industry is that we pick? Then you just move to the right, okay, and delivering that or in using that product and maintaining it. And sometimes you'll see, oh, there's an opportunity there because there is a pain. Great, we put a little blue dot there. That's an opportunity. And then we say, okay, where does the industry currently focus? And usually it might be here under use, as an example here of this thing that we were making. And maybe it's over here for some other thing under delivery or maintenance. But usually it's only 2 or 3 areas that a specific industry focuses on something. And so this helps you get in the customer's shoes, that empathy, understanding where current gaps could be in that market that you could take advantage of. So let's look at an example before we get into an exercise. So let's pretend you are the washing machine industry, washer dryer, and you're GE and you want to take a look at the industry. Well, most of the industry is going to focus on, whoops, go to the next, there you go. We use washing machines because they're productive, right? We don't have to wash clothes by hand. That's the main function of that industry for washing machines, is to be productive. Click the next one. But what about convenience? How could there be a pain? How could there, which is an opportunity, to improve the convenience of washing machines? What could that look like? Well, click the next one. This is an example of a new washing machine that's improving convenience. The outer shell is the washing machine. And the blue thing or turquoise color, that is the hamper. Instead of having to sort your clothes, you literally pick the hamper up and you drop it in the washing machine. That is now the tumbler, the bucket. There's no more sorting. It's completely convenient because you're literally washing your hamper and you do nothing else as the user. So it leaps and bounds of value as far as the convenience factor. So that's just one example. Click next. One more. So we normally don't buy washing machines because they're fun and increase our image, right? It's not usually a social thing. We're like, it's in the basement, it's in the garage. You don't want people to go in your laundry room because it's a disaster, right? Well, what if you are a millennial and you live in downtown San Francisco in a studio apartment and you always are entertaining, but you have no place to hide your washer and dryer? How could we make purchasing a washer more fun and increase your image? Click next. This is a new washing machine and dryer. So it's art, it is furniture. There are no buttons, and as you see the red one on the right, you basically wave your hand over it like a high-end trash can now on the top stuff. So you could put this out in your front room almost as art deco furniture and not be embarrassed because you have this old school washer and dryer there. So now at the point of sale, you're actually increasing the whole thing, emotional, social, fun, and image. I'm going to buy that washing machine. May not work as good, might not be as productive or convenient, but it sure looks fun and increases image. You could click next. One more. So environmentally friendly. The industry maybe doesn't focus enough on environmentally friendly, so you see that as a pain point or an opportunity. So what could a solution look like there? Click next. These are real solutions. This is by Electrolux. There is no water in this washing machine. It cleans your clothes by using UV waves, UV light. So if you're someone who is a very green person, eco-friendly, and you're like, I'm done with soap, it doesn't care if it's eco-friendly soap, I don't want to keep using water. I want a machine to clean my clothes that uses light, no water. This does that. So that's a niche segment that is a huge pain point that now you are solving because the industry does not focus there. So these are just examples of, if you're going through an industry saying, here's an opportunity, here's a pain, we don't focus there. Now you need to go out and validate. Is there enough people, right? Market size, back to Craig's initial point of, what investors look for. If it's me, you, and your mom, it's probably not a big market. But now we got to go out and figure that out. Is there enough opportunity here for us to actually create a solution around these pain points and create what we call a blue ocean, new market space? So what we're going to do now is we're going to break into breakout rooms into 3 groups. And we're actually going to look at the toilet paper industry. We all use toilet paper, right? It's not a innovative, technologically advanced product. We've had toilet paper for, hundreds of years. We're going to look at it from the perspective of maybe you're an entrepreneur and you want to break into the toilet paper industry. Where are opportunities or pains as in the industry right now? Maybe it's from a user perspective. Maybe it's not as eco-friendly as you want, or it's fun and image. And then we're going to put blue dots around these areas. And then we're going to put a red dot. Where does the industry currently focus? And we're going to come up with hopefully some creative ideas. So we'll break into rooms now. Cameron, I'm going to throw it to you, and we'll just say we'll go through. We've got 10 minutes, perfect, or maybe 8 minutes, and then we're good to go.
Perfect. So there was 2 quick questions. Troy, I don't know if you wanted to ask your questions or if they got answered during Craig's part of the presentation. I know that if you want to bring those in or share if they already got answered.
Earlier when he was talking about questions for the customers, would that be considered a targeted survey, like targeting certain things that you want to know?
We're talking about my questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so one of the things I believe is that you earn what you learn. So two things. First of all, it's not a survey, it's an interview. That's the first, so we can ask follow-on questions. We're trying to get an understanding of when did somebody buy, what made them buy from us, how can we make it easier to be a customer? That's all the stuff that I'm interested in learning when I'm doing a post-purchase interview of this nature. And it's really so I can then go back and say, hey, who are most likely to buy from me based upon those that are already buying? How do I find a way and go find a whole bunch of people just like them? Those are the only things I'm trying to do from that perspective. When we're doing some of these problem validation or customer discovery interviews, those are much more open-ended, where we're trying to learn more about the user. This is very specific. After it's happened, how do I find a way to replicate it? Does that answer the question, Troy? Yes, no?
Sounds good.
Okay. So it's not a survey. You don't say, here, go click on 5 things and tell me something. It is an interview. It's really important, and I've learned this a bunch of different ways about between interviews and surveys. Sometimes you don't know what questions to ask in the early days, so you can't send out a survey. The challenge I have with most people that do survey work is they ask questions about the future. They don't ask questions about the past. When you ask any questions that say, could you, would you, or any of that stuff, you end up with something called a say-do gap. People say one thing, and then when you build a product based on what they said, they do something totally different. So when you do these interviews, and once you got past the first 20 or 30, maybe you want to do the surveys because you know what questions to ask, but on the first 20 or 30, you don't. You always want to ask questions about the past. Past action is a predictor of future behavior. So it's not a survey, Thor. It is a interview.
Great questions. And
Can I make the point?
yeah, and what we're
Okay.
trying to find here, folks, in these type of examples are insights, right, to the pains and problems and gains that somebody is looking to overcome, not validating your solution or product, but understanding their issues and why they're in need of even doing something, or how do they overcome this problem. So great questions, and take that methodology through this, right? We're going to look at an industry. We all can be users of toilet paper. Where could opportunities be? And then we'll look at the red dot, where are 2 or 3 of the areas where we compete as industry now. And hopefully you have some blue dots, so that are opportunities for us to then go out and explore and gather more insights.
Perfect. So
Cameron,
what time do you want me to call us back?
let's do just 8 minutes. So I know
Okay.
we're
Perfect.
So
All right.
red dots are a red ocean, blue dots are a blue ocean. Is that the theory, Brian?
yes, that's right. Industry, where the industry focuses now is where the red dots go.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then blue dots are pain points that are also opportunities.
All righty. I will open the room and call us back in 7 or 8 minutes.
Very
Okay.
good. Thank you.
All righty. So if you're not seeing to join a room, you're still hanging out with me here. So I will share my screen here, confirming you all can see my Google Chrome here with Miro. Awesome. All righty. So we are looking at the industry of toilet paper. So let's start with our red dots. Where would people, where does the industry currently compete in kind of that red ocean, right? How are they currently competing? If you were to kind of launch into it with a similar methodology, what's the main area that they compete?
Use and convenience.
Use and convenience. So we're in the use category and then in the convenience. All right. And so what does convenience look like in the toilet paper industry for use?
When it's everywhere, and when you can purchase it everywhere, maybe.
Gotcha. So you're thinking of like where it's distributed?
Yeah.
So would that be maybe purchase and convenience over here? So it's like it's going to be sold
Yeah.
everywhere.
I guess so. Yeah.
Right. How do we feel about that, everyone? I think that's good. Let's throw that in there. any other places that we see red ocean when we think of toilet paper, right? So there's the experience cycle. So from where we're purchasing it to how we're getting it to where we'd ultimately use it, how we use it, any alternatives, and then how we dispose of it. Any other areas of where the red competition might be?
Also disposal convenience, I think.
Disposal convenience. Okay, I like that. Yeah. Let's do maybe one or two more, if there is any. If not, then no worries.
I don't know where you put it, but like, you know, they compete on like the quality, you know, like the softness.
Yeah, so I think that might be like customer productivity use is kind of what I
Okay.
know. Productivity is a little bit weird, but that could be, you know, softness. Yeah, there we go. So use. I think those are good. So we're looking at, in terms of the experience, we're looking at the purchase, the use, and the disposal. So now thinking outside of the box, what are some other areas of this experience, the buyer experience, that we could innovate in, right? And so innovation is really looking at an increase in leap in value. And so we're looking at, we already compete in kind of these main areas as a red ocean. So how can we look at these other factors, so these utility levers, to create value in a blue ocean sense?
Eco-friendliness.
Okay, and is that
And
in the
not
purchase?
sure better than purchase or use though. Purchase probably.
Okay, so is that like using different material, maybe like how it's sourced and
Yeah.
everything?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's fair.
Actually, I have one thing. I'm not sure whether it's risk or consumer productivity. That is for people with allergies. Actually, I really would love something that is, you know, not dusty and not making me sneeze, but I can't find a good product out there.
Interesting. So is that like the particular type of like paper that's used?
Right. Yeah. Unless, you know, whenever you tear the paper, it's less dusty and not
Okay.
making me sneeze. I would
Okay.
love something like that, because I know some people who, when they're looking for like the paper tissues, they're looking for something that's less.
Gotcha. So are you thinking of like
irritating.
when it gets like stored? So like if you're storing it at your house or
Right. And also when you're using it.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna put it like right here. It's kind of the risk reduction of I guess the sneezing or allergies or something that that's
Right.
sort, and it's between the storage and usage. So that's the delivery and use, I guess.
Right.
So we'll bridge
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Okay.
Is
Any
it
other? Yep, go ahead.
for fun and image? Is that more towards like branding? I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of the example. So the example,
Like
right, of the washing machines, right? So typically you wouldn't think of like, so yeah, maybe that's the case. Maybe you live in a small apartment and you lack an ability to store under, under your sink or something. So you want something that looks a certain way. So maybe it's could certainly be something where I was like, hey, it looks like origami toilet paper or something. So you never know. Like that could be certainly something. So
I mean, I've seen memes of gold toilet papers.
gold toilet paper. All right, so that could be one. And where do we see that? Is that a purchase, a delivery, a use? So delivery is kind of, I think for us, is partly storing and getting it to our places of dwelling. So we think right here.
I guess so.
All right.
I think another one is regular delivery, so you don't actually have to go to the store.
Gotcha. So regular delivery. So do you see that as productivity, simplicity, risk reduction, eco-friendliness?
Early
What-
simplicity, productivity, kind of in between there.
Okay. So we're seeing a lot of innovation in this delivery storage realm. Okay, I like it. What about anything like to go along with the toilet paper? I know the maintenance is not really probably something that we would do, but anything like that. But we can certainly continue to look here. We have maybe one more minute and I'll call them back. So it's interesting looking at this, right? We haven't put any blue dots on this customer productivity because that's the red ocean, right? That's where there's always that competition and there's not a ton of real innovation and value that could be created. And same with the convenience factor, right? It's pretty simplistic, but we did create some innovative ideas in relation to these other utility levers, and mainly in that purchase and delivery. So I will call them back, and if there's any other additional ideas, but that was I enjoyed the brainstorm and appreciate it. Any thoughts, questions as you're looking at this tool for kind of visualizing places to innovate and create new value? Vanessa, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I was just thinking about supplements.
Mm-hmm.
So something to pair with toilet papers, is that the way to think about?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, if they're producing toilet papers, maybe the other types of towels, like paper towels as well, and then bundle it up. I'm not sure.
Like it. Awesome. Well, good brainstorm. Thank you all for the fun ideas. So I'm
really interested in some feedback on this one. I mean, who doesn't love talking about toilet paper? And I'm curious, Cameron and Craig, in your rooms, if you got real, right, about the uses and risks of certain issues with toilet paper.
Yeah, maybe not as real as you, since you have a very red face. So
I mean, we talked about risk, right, in using toilet paper. Well, you stop at the gas station and it's one ply, and you're like, you don't take enough. There's a significant risk to you, isn't there? You're like, well, that sucked. Now what do I do?
So, or it's these little squares, right?
Yes.
That are like, oh my God, how do they even still make those little square things?
Oh yeah, exactly. How many of you, you got to mummy up your hand because the one ply toilet paper doesn't work well, right? I mean, we've all done that. So the reason I bring toilet paper up, some of you have heard this case study before. It's a real one with Blue Ocean Strategy, the people who created Blue Ocean Strategy, Kim and Malvern. Kimberly-Clark, one of the biggest, consumer companies in the world. You probably heard of Kimberly-Clark, millions of products. They specifically were looking at toilet paper for South America and Mexico. They had 50 competitors. They're like, how do we get more competitive? What can we do? How do we create revenue streams? So they literally went out to the 99% of the people who live in the small huts, right? The favelas. We're talking not the 1%ers in South America and Mexico, but the small huts. And said, why don't you buy more toilet paper and why don't you buy ours, basically? And they looked at the problems. And people basically said, well, one, it's too big. I don't have anywhere to store 12 rolls of toilet paper. And two, why can't you make it recyclable? And so the third biggest one was, it's usually mom, as Craig was talking about, who goes to buy the stuff. It's on light rail or the bus, right? Or the train. It's not by my F-150 pulling up to Costco in these little favelas. And they said, I can't carry it. I'm taking my groceries on the bus to and from the store an hour each way. I can't carry a 24-pack, 12-pack of toilet paper. There's no handle. So what did Kimberly-Clark do? They're like, oh, this is easy. We're going to scrunch the toilet paper together, literally, right? Because the roll is cardboard. As soon as you squeeze it, it bounces right back. So they squeeze it together, which saved 40% of storage space, as well as packaging and storage costs. And they put a plastic handle on the bag so mom could hold it now. And they made it out of recycled paper. So when we look at that utility map, we could have said, the industry doesn't focus on the storage, the recyclability, the convenience of carrying it during purchase, right? It was all about using it and being productive, not about purchase and convenience, not about eco-friendly. Especially if you live in a third world, what if you have to put it in a trash can? There is no sewage, right? How do we make it more biodegradable and recyclable? So a lot of things, when you look at the pain points of a buyer, of a customer's journey, Think about the industry, where they focus, and where potentially there are pains and opportunities for you. Craig, back to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, let me just go share my screen again. Desktop 2. Remember to click on share. Okay, so the question then is, what's next? So if we know it's feasible, the next piece we need to understand is the financial aspect of this. In fact, just before I did this session, I was able to, while I'm at this place called the North Forge Technology Exchange, I did a 90-minute session just on financial analysis. So there is a, as you see on the link here under 150startups.com/resources, there's a form you can fill in. You can do your entire financial analysis, income statement, cash flow, balance sheet, in all of 20 minutes. You fill in the form, it gives you the template, and it gives you a video where I'm actually walking a student at a university through the process of filling in the entire sheet with all the instructions. I think everybody here has access to LeanStack. I'm a big fan of LeanStack. So this is what my spreadsheet looks like. There's a little bit of work involved in this. There's a fair bit of input. It does take 20 minutes. What I love about LeanStack is you build a customer factory, which can be done in a very short period of time using what are often called the pirate metrics. So pirate as in like R, because that's what they start with. So you can use the pirate metrics. It then will build out a traction roadmap that will show you how many customers you can actually get. When you finish this whole leaner canvas and you've gone through this process, there are really three things you want to try and figure out. Do I want to stop because people don't want this? Maybe I need to find a way to pivot because while people want it, the metrics don't make sense. The cost of me to acquire a customer is greater than all the money I'm never going to make from having them as a customer. Means you generally need to pivot. Now you need to either go find something else to do for the same customer, because now you understand that customer, or maybe the customer you've been focused on doesn't have enough money or doesn't spend enough money. Maybe you need to go find a way to find a different customer. Once you've done this and people do want it and you can actually make money at it, then you get to the point where you complete a complete link canvas, go away and build out perhaps an MVP. If you want to learn more about these triggers that I have talked about, I wrote a book about this over 10 years ago. I give it away to students. If you fill in the form, it'll send you the PDF version of the entire book. The first 3 chapters, which most people will, in most books, don't get past the first 3 chapters. So I wrote this book in a very specific way. The first 3 chapters are the things that I learned in analyzing almost 20 years of luck as a salesperson. The last 4 chapters was what was I doing for 20 years to be able to make that actually happen. If people want to reach out to me, text is almost always the best way to reach me. I'm just going to show you something that will help you understand why you don't want to email me. Can anybody see the, can you see the number in the bottom right-hand corner? Do I have to get closer?
Yeah.
Anybody, you see that number?
Yeah, it looks big.
216,000 unread emails in my inbox. So if you send me an email and don't reply, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just that I got so many emails that day. It just got bumped into the next day stuff, and I get so many more every day. So if you want to talk or follow up in any way, shape, or form, that's my cell phone. That's the best way to reach me. And with that, we have like 5 minutes left for questions. Brian, Cameron?
Yeah, let me jump in real quick before we do questions. So the last section, the reason why Craig went through it quick is because next week we're going to tackle some of those topics that Craig went through. So you looked at he mentioned LeanStack and the customer forces canvas and the traction roadmap. Week 3, next week, we're going to look at that customer forces model with the acquisition, the retention, the pirate metrics, and help you understand those things better, as well as the traction roadmap. And week 4, we're going to really look at the financial projections and help you make sense of what those things are to put in the pitch deck or to talk to investors about. And LeanStack specifically, I'm going to pull up my quick screen here, just a second, and give you a link. Here we go.
part of the message I just threw in the chat. If you look
Okay,
at the
thank you.
90-day lean stack, that's
So-
what Brian's gonna share.
Lean Stack is the company who created the Lean Canvas that we're using as the foundation. Craig and I are both certified coaches there, and one of the things that I've talked to Ash, the founder, about is helping some of you who are ready for this journey in the 90-day startup. So you could, oh, looks like someone took that control.
I just unshared it.
Oh,
You weren't sharing
okay.
anything.
Oh, I thought I was sharing my screen there. Are you seeing the link?
Yep.
Okay, so if you click on that link, you can go take a look at what the 90-day startup is with Lean Stack. It's a 4-fee accelerator course, but with someone like Ash leading it, someone like myself to be your coach every other week to help you, all the tools and processes. So if you're really thinking of an accelerator, you're at that point, then go here. And so I wanted to talk through both of those things and the concepts that Craig was referring to. So now back to you, so we can open it up for Q&A in general.
So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask away. We have about 3 minutes for questions, and then I'll do some wrap up with the links that I shared in the chat.
Or even feedback if people don't have questions. It was
Absolutely.
good. What do we do different or better next time around?
Favorite topic or insight you got today?
And the silence is deafening. Anybody?
We're back. Cameron,
Look like Mark has a question, and then Vanessa.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Craig, when you're coming up with you mentioned bifurcated questions.
Yeah.
How do you know that you're using the right bifurcated questions in dealing with a client or coming together to try to get them to the how or when?
Good question. Here's the way that I come at this. I socialize. So I'm a big believer of networking. So I might come up with some bifurcation questions. I might reach out to Brian and say, I'm thinking about these. What do you think? So I find socializing and gathering feedback from other people is one of the best ways to come up with really good bifurcation questions. And I wish there was a simple list you could come up with, but it's not quite that easy. I think you just try some, see if they work. If they don't work, go try some other ones. There is no, as far as I'm concerned, there is no substitute for action. Just go do it, make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, go do something else. Extroverts are fortunate because they have this unfair advantage when it comes to entrepreneurship. We generally don't care if we make mistakes. We're going to do something, learn something, do something different or better as a result. The challenge for introverts is that because they tend to be a little more risk averse, they tend to do way more research before they do anything. Then they do something and they realize they were wrong. Now they do even more research. So by the time an extrovert has done something 5 times, an introvert might have only done it once or twice. So for me, you don't have to be an extrovert, but you just simply have to go, let's go try these 3 questions. I think they're right. No, that didn't get me the insights I'm after. Let's go get some different questions. But I'm a big believer of reaching out and asking people for help. It's amazing what happens when all you do is ask. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
And we're going to tackle that next week, which is experimentation, right? Getting out and doing these things, right? Lean experiments quickly in 2 weeks. And that's what most people don't do. That's the hard part, Mark. And the rest of it is, like Craig said, there's no silver bullet. It's hard. And that's why most entrepreneurs and companies don't do it. And they just try stuff and it fails.
I have
That's
a
a good
question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's fine.
Is that a
You can go
certificate
first.
For entrepreneurs? Is it like a series? Is it for, for people who want to, start a business? Or is it just an educational, I just want to get an idea.
I missed the first part of your question. What's it about?
The question is this like a certification that Sac State is offering for entrepreneurs?
Are you talking about what we're doing right now?
Yes. Yes.
No, this is a free webinar. We do a 5-week series
Mhm.
about using the Lean Canvas, different methodologies to help you. If you want more hands-on and in-depth, then there's several programs that I'll let Cameron talk about in just a second, as well as the Lean Stack that I sent you the link for, which is a 90-day accelerator that we partner with. But we also have a certificate program and other programs that we also do locally if you're in the region. So Cameron, go ahead and jump on that.
Yeah, I do want to, Vanessa had a question and then I'll wrap up just to make sure. So go ahead, Vanessa.
So while we were in the breakout room with Cameron, I just wanted to confirm again what supplement, like it was supplement, right? What supplement in the buyer utility map exactly meant, because I asked if this was right, because the way to think about when it comes to toilet paper is since they're already making toilet papers, maybe they could also make other tissues. Is that like a supplement? I'm not sure.
So on the buyer utility map, a supplement is an accessory, something that supplements the use. Think of a computer. So if I have a computer, what supplements do I need to run that computer? I need a screen, I need a mouse, I need external hard drive, I need a desk, right? I need an HDMI cable. Those are supplements to supplement the use of that thing.
All right.
Can I give you the toilet paper example, Vanessa?
Yeah.
So it turned out that when they came out with these triple-sized rolls,
Mm-hmm.
not many people had enough holders that actually held a triple-sized roll. So they actually had to come up with some special adapter that you could then also get to be able to then get the triple-sized roll. So taking something and adding to something that you already use is the way that I think of this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you.
Good question. Awesome. Well, I'm going to just speak to those links that I shared, and then we'll do an official wrap. So I did share some links. The first one is if you're a Sac State student and you're working towards the leadership initiative, feel free to fill out that form. That will give you credit for attending the session here today. The second link is our certificate for innovation and entrepreneurship that's run in partnership with the College of Continuing Education. We're accepting applications for that program, and that will be set to launch in early October. The third link is that 90-day Lean Stack Accelerator that Brian and Craig are involved in. That's a referral code, so you can hop on into that space. But just a couple more links here. We have the Lean Innovator Cohort, which is a 5-week program that we run in partnership with the Small Business Development Center, and that is set to launch in August. And so we have applications closing in the middle of next week. And then just the final resources, you can attend Startup SAC Happy Hour. We'll be doing a panel on investment here at the seed stage round. So that will be on August 31st. So you can attend that. And then just the other ones are for the toolkit series and another local resource. And then to answer some of your questions, we will be sharing the this recording. So I'll be sharing that as well as a PDF version of the tools and slides that were discussed here today. So those will all be coming and you'll get access to that. And then we look forward to having you attend session 3. And to finalize, just want to say thank you, Craig, for coming in and being a guest speaker, especially on your long road trip. Tremendous knowledge sharing here today. And then Brian, thank you as always for being here and leading the charge on the toolkit series. And then lastly, thank you all for taking the risk to be an entrepreneur and building your ideas. And we look forward to being a part of that journey. So feel free to connect and we will be following up with those resources and we'll see you next week. Thank you all.
Stay healthy, everybody. Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Craig. Great job. Thank you, everyone. Go ahead and email us with any questions and any links you need.
All righty.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.